Hello, welcome to Alyssa Jean's Reviews, and welcome to my review for Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Season 2, Episode 2, Ad Aspera Per Aspera. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that all wrong. I should know how to pronounce it since it was mentioned in the episode itself, which is actually rare for an episode title to actually be mentioned in the episode. Anyways, this review will be full of spoilers if you have not yet seen the episode, so make sure that you watch it before you watch this review. That should go without saying. So, this is the Una trial episode that we all knew was coming. And I had said previously, yeah, let's just get the trial episode out of the way. The trial or court-martial trope in Star Trek has never been my favorite. However, this is I would put this in a certain category within the trial court-martial trope. The ones that I don't like is the falsely accused trope, where one of our main cast members is falsely accused of a crime, and we, the audience, know goddamn well they definitely did not commit it. And it's just a matter of slogging to the end to get to the point where the thing that we knew didn't happen is proven and blah, blah, blah. And I'm so sick of that trope. Don't love it. But there's another type of trial episode, and that is the type where it's not about a cast member or a crew member being falsely accused. It is more about having a trial, using the trial format to have a philosophical, ethical, moral debate and discussion. So in that category, I would put Measure of a Man in there. Also, the drumhead, although, I mean, kind of Picard gets accused of something at the end, but that's not really what it's about. So I would kind of put the drumhead in that category, where it's more about having a moral, ethical discussion and debate. Those type of episodes I like better. And this one I put in that category with those two episodes. And those two episodes are great episodes. You're going to see them both in my next video of my top 100 in the 50 through 26 category. They're both in that range. So I consider them in the top 50 of all of Star Trek. So I consider them great episodes. This episode is in that category. However, not all episodes in that category are necessarily great. I would think of Author, which was a total ripoff of Measure of the Man. Author from Star Trek Voyager in the 7th season. It was about something else entirely for the first half of the episode, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it turns into a cheap knockoff of Measure of a Man, and that was not good. I also think of the episode Dax from the first season of Deep Space Nine, which was kind of a combination of a falsely accused and a moral debate. And the moral debate just didn't hold any water, and it just wasn't any good. So just being in that category does not automatically make it good. But I do, in general, tend to like that kind of court-martial or trial episode better than the falsely accused one. So I would say that this episode is closer to Measure of a Man and Drumhead than it is to Author, and Dax. However, I would also say it is not as good as either of those episodes. Both of those episodes, as I said, are my Star Trek top 50. And I'm not counting Modern Trek in my Star Trek top 100, but this one definitely would not be in my top 100. So it's not as good as those other ones. I think the main thing that really makes this episode great for me is not how Una gets off. Because I thought going in, we know Una's going to get off. We've seen her in the trailer. So it's a matter of how she gets off that will make or break this episode. But that's not really the case. I actually have some nitpicks about how she got off, which I'll talk about later. But what really makes this a really strong episode that I'm really drawn to is that finally, after all these years, a Star Trek episode finally addresses the elephant in the room, which is that Starfleet and the Federation are a bunch of fucking bigots against people with genetic modifications. I've heard fans say this, I've heard YouTubers say this, I've heard critics say this, I've heard it out there in the general discourse that Starfleet, they're bigots against genetically modified people. But this is the first time that an actual Star Trek episode addresses the issue and takes it head on. And you have a character outright calling Starfleet bigots because they are. And we get a lot of parallels to modern day, some of them overt and stated outright, some of them implied. But they're very powerful either way. We're talking about racial inequalities, discrimination because of religion. We're talking about discrimination because of gender identity, sexual orientation. All those parallels are drawn, and it's about damn time because we, the audience, a lot of us saw those parallels all along, but no episode was brave enough to actually go there and point it out. And it's about goddamn time. And when this character, this lawyer character, calls them bigots, it's not just you guys are a bunch of bigots and fuck you, and that's the end of it. I mean, that's how it starts in their initial speech, but it turns into a debate and discussion because the lawyer has to learn to you can't just simply accuse Starfleet of being bigots. You also have to have a discussion about it, show the human side of it, show the actual effects that it has on Una, rather than just simply name calling. So that was brilliant. That was so good. So that's what really, really makes this episode a strong episode, in my opinion. But I do have some complaints about it as well. So with that said, now let's go ahead and jump into the episode. Let's go through some of the scenes. All right, so the episode begins with Pike going to get this lawyer character, and he has to wear that mask to breathe to show us that the Illyrians are hiding out on a planet that humans can't really breathe on. Yeah, this whole scene, this was like what I was thinking of before when I was like, yeah, let's just get this trial episode out of the way. That's kind of how I felt about the scene. It's very tropey. It's the classic, oh, I'm going to try to convince you to come help us. And you're going to say, no, no way in hell am I going to help you. And then I'm going to have a witty line and I'm going to convince you. And then you're going to come help us. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. I've seen this a gazillion times. Whatever. Let's just move on. And then we get... Pike now back in the Enterprise, and when we first see Pike in his quarters making dinner, and what's her face, Captain Patel comes in there, I was thrown off because wait, he's on the Enterprise. I don't know. I guess I assumed that the episode 1 was going to be taking place concurrently with this one, and then Pike was going to go off, get the lawyer, and do the trial by himself. I mean, it makes more sense to have the Enterprise crew there. I just don't know that I love the timing of it. I don't think the timing really works between these first 2 episodes. So I guess Pike was just getting the lawyer for that entire episode 1. I don't know. It's a little iffy, but it's fine. I'm willing to hand wave it and dismiss it because the overall it was important. I think that all the other crew members were there, especially Leon. But it just threw me off at first. That's all. Then we get into the trial. And as I mentioned previously, the lawyer lady, sorry, I don't remember this character's name. I should probably look it up, but I'm not going to. I'm such a bad YouTube reviewer. Anyways, so she starts off very accusatory. And like, you guys are a bunch of fucking bigots. Oh, you break the Prime Directive all the time, Captain April, or I guess Admiral April now. I wonder if we're going to see any of these things that she made up. I love how, or she brought up. I love how they invented all these different incidents that Captain April went. I want to see the adventures of Captain April. Now we're going to get a prequel to the prequel. Never mind. Anyways, so she's like, "Oh, you broke the Prime Directive, and you say you care about laws." And Nobody responded well to that. That was not a good strategy. Everybody was like, whoa, dude, no, this is not going to win you any favors. So thankfully, she learns as she goes along through this episode. Oh, also, I should bring up the fact that Una declined the plea deal where she could have served no prison time and gone off and lived a happy life as a Federation citizen, but never be in Starfleet ever again. And Una was right to bring up, oh, so you can cover your tracks and cover your mistake. And then they come back way harsher. And we know this is coming from the evil Vulcan Admiral character, which I'll get to him a little bit later. Anyways, let's move back on into the trial. So, as with any trial episode, it initially is not going well, doesn't look good for a hero. The lawyer does course correct a little bit. She does bring in Spock and M'Benga and Leon to all give their personal testimony, which that was a nice scene, how they interspliced all three of them together. But Una still isn't on track. That's not enough. She's not on track to win. So we have this other kind of side plot with Leon trying to discover who turned Una in, and we get the reveal later that she fears that it was her, or that someone found her log and turned that in. And at this point, I think the lawyer has figured it out. I don't know how, but she seems to have deduced that Una had turned herself in. She was like, no, it wasn't you. So then we get to the scene where she calls Una to the stand. Even though in the beginning she said, there's no way in hell I'm going to do that. I'm not going to hand the case to the prosecution. And she gets Una to admit that she turned herself in. And at first we're like, where is she going with this? I mean, I love that they were humanizing. I love this part of it, how they were humanizing Una's experience. We also got kind of the flashback at the very beginning of the episode. I forgot to mention that. I don't think we needed the flashback, but we got it. And it really like draws a lot of parallels to all of the bigotry that we see in modern day. I wish I could say it was in our past, but all of the things that they talked about, having to move to different cities, like people in Florida with trans kids having to move to different states, that shit is still happening. So all of that really struck a chord with me. And I love that the lawyer took that tact to humanize it, but I still didn't see where she was going with it until we get the reveal and the closing argument where she brings out that big, huge ass, dusty old lawyer book. And I love that they still have dusty old lawyer books in the 23rd century. And that's not a complaint. I think that's great. They should still have books in the 23rd century. And she reads the law, or has Captain Patel read the law about asking for asylum. No, I think this is a little bit contrived because as she is reading it, then we get flashes back to Una's speech that she gave, a few minutes earlier in the episode. And she happens to hit on all the precise key words that are in that law, such as safety was one of them. And Una seems to have not been brought into the fold. Like, she didn't know that that's what the plan was. So she just, by happenstance, happened to just say all of the keywords in that law. So it all neatly ties together. That felt a bit contrived to me. I'm sorry. I don't think that it would work out that neat and nice like that, that she would happen to say exactly the precise words she needed to say that were in the law. And at the end, the lawyer says, well, Una asked for asylum. Did she, though? I mean, she never actually asked for asylum. Let's just be real. So I guess she's just trying to say, well, technically, on a technicality, this could be construed as her asking for asylum. And like, I Yes, but the way she presented it was like she asked for asylum, and then at the end, the judge was like, "We grant her asylum." She didn't really ask for asylum. I mean, okay, fine, I'll buy it. I mean, but I guess it was presented more as a face value thing when it wasn't. It was more of a implied thing. Um, but I don't know. I feel like I'm splitting hairs. This doesn't bother me all that much, honestly. It's just to the point that I was making earlier where the way that Una gets off was not the great part of the episode for me. It was uh, the parallels that are brought to modern times, the bigotry, and Starfleet finally getting called out for the bigotry. All of that is what made the episode, not how she got off. Now, I do want to circle back around to the evil Vulcan admiral. Very classic evil prosecutor trope, and of course, is a Vulcan. I don't know. Star Trek likes making Vulcans villains for whatever reason. I don't know. He's a very cartoonish villain, and uh, uh, we had the scene earlier in the episode that was supposed to elicit humor with Spock and this evil admiral just sitting there, and from across the room, Mumbaba is explaining to Ortegas that they hate each other, and then Spock gets up and says, "I apologize for my outrage." And so this or outburst. So this actually reminds me of Lower Decks episodes Wage Duge from season 2, which I just recorded a review for because I'm working on my Lower Deck season 2 rewind review, and that should be out tomorrow. But I just recorded my review for that episode, and Tallinn also gets accused of having outbursts. But the difference there was it worked there where I don't think it works here, because there, if you look at Tallinn, you look at the animation of her eyes, if you look at her tone of voice, the particular word choice that she makes, in very subtle ways, she is having an outburst by Vulcan standards. Whereas here, it's just two Vulcans sitting there. You don't hear anything they're saying. They're just sitting there staring at each other. And it's kind of ridiculous for Spock to say, "Oh, I apologize for my outburst." I mean, that's kind of dumb. So there it worked. Because Tallinn really was having an outburst by Vulcan standards. Here, it was just two Vulcans sitting there. So it doesn't work in the same way. And I have to point out, like, the thing that bothered me, I think the plot contrivance that bothered me the most about this episode, which is when the evil admiral decides to question Una. He asks, when did Captain Pike know that you were Illyrian? And Una's lawyer, says, "Objection! Irrelevance. Captain Pike is not the one on trial here. What should have happened is sustained. Captain Pike is not the one on trial here. Move on." The fact that he is allowed to continue was bullshit. And he responds by saying, "Well, if Captain Pike knew about it, then we're talking about charges of conspiracy." Okay, motherfucker, but she isn't charged with conspiracy, so you can't just invent new charges in the middle of a trial. I mean, I'm assuming that this is based off of the American judicial system. I mean, that's the vibe that I'm getting here. You can't just all of a sudden make up new charges in the middle of the trial. You want to charge her with conspiracy additionally? You can do that. There's a whole separate process. You have a whole separate trial for that. You can't just all of a sudden out of nowhere start bringing up Captain Pike conspiracy charges in the middle of the trial. That is bullshit that was allowed to happen. And it was allowed to happen because of plot contrivance to add to drama, which you didn't need, because I already felt that there was drama. Like, you didn't need to have this plot contrivance. So that I think that's the scene that bothered me the most out of this episode. That was total bullshit that he was allowed to get away with that. But then, of course, we have the great scene that I mentioned before, where she, even though that's a little bit of plot contrivances too, I still love the scene where the lawyer bust out that book and to go through all that. And then, of course, at the end, they grant her asylum and everybody's happy. And now we can move on to the scenes we already saw in the trailer, or we already know Una is there. Okay, so let me go ahead and wrap this one up, and I'll give you my rating out of 10. Okay, so each week I give every episode I review a rating out of 10, with 1 being the lowest possible score, 10 being the highest possible score. So this week's episode 2, I am giving an 8 out of 10. This is the second consecutive week in which I have given Strange New World episode an 8. I think we still have a very strong, very solid beginning to the season. I feel immensely satisfied that we finally have an episode that addresses Starfleet's bigotry toward genetically modified people. Obviously, it's not a 9 or a 10, thanks to some of the plot contrivances, some of the nitpicks that I have, but it's still a really strong episode. Don't get me wrong. I still enjoyed it overall. I might even rank it slightly higher than last week's. Like if I have to do a top 10 at the end of the year, which I may do at the end of the season, I should say, I might have this one ranked slightly above last week's. I don't know. They're kind of neck and neck for very different reasons. And that's what I love about Strange New Worlds is they can have two very different episodes that both get 8s. They're both that I love for different reasons. So an 8 out of 10 is the rating from me. Okay, that does it, everybody. Please subscribe to my channel if you have not already. Hit the bell for notifications. Check out my Lower Deck Season 2 Rewind review coming tomorrow. And check out my Star Trek Top 100. Got 2 installments out there already, and the 3rd installment coming out in July. So check out all of that. And join me back here next week for my review of Season 2, Episode 3. All right, everybody, goodbye.